Found this pallet on the side of the road leaning against an electrical pole. Picked it up, pulled it in the back of the truck, and came back and dropped it off at the shop that day. Later, I went back and started breaking down the pallet into whatever pieces were there. I didn't really think about making a video on it at the time, so I didn't capture that part. So I just used a surveillance video here to kind of show you where I was at. I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do with this, the wood from this pallet, but it is certainly true that one man's trash is another man's treasure. And this is a good example of it. I had picked up a miter saw recently, and I didn't really have a dedicated place for it, so I decided to use the wood from this pallet to make myself a miter saw table. The longer pieces were 10 foot, close to it, or a little bit more. There was some individual 10 footers. There was some that were sandwiched together. I left them sandwiched together. You can see here on the right. Some of them weren't two 10-foot pieces. They were a 10-foot piece with smaller pieces nailed to it. Some of them were around 4 foot. And then there were some 1x4s that were 10 foot as well. And so I just started working on removing all the nails from all the pieces of wood. The idea was to kind of design as I go. I wasn't quite sure. I used a previous table to kind of gauge the size that I wanted, the height, and then just tried to make it as big as I could based on the wood that I had. Here this is where I started with the base, cutting or kind of the frame, the top frame of the table, cutting all the sections at 45. I believe it was 2 foot by close to 5 foot. So we started with that top frame. That's the new miter saw that I picked up, which seems to be working pretty well so far. These are the ones that were sandwiched together. I didn't break them down and take the nails out, but because I was using them for the legs, so I just cut out sections where they were full pieces and kind of went around the seam. So if they had smaller pieces attached to it, I just kind of cut those out and got 2 full lengths of legs for the legs. Now I'm cutting some more at 45. There'll be a top frame and a bottom frame. Bottom frame will kind of keep the bottom of the legs secure, and I'll have a shelf at the bottom. So here's the start of the assembly. Just putting the 45s, it was 2 foot by, it was not exactly 5 feet, but it was close to it. And so I started drilling a pilot hole onto one side into the other 2x4, and then running a screw in it. I'm using these Torx screws, these decking screws that I used to build the planters, the cedar planters that I had another video on. So you got two of these Torx screws or decking screws on one on each side, one on the top, one on the bottom, so they don't kind of run into each other. And then now I'm starting to put the legs, and so I did the same thing. I pre-drilled the hole and added those decking screws. You'll see at some point I put the legs, the orientation of the legs aren't right. I did that a couple times, just not paying attention. So I'll end up backing that out and then fixing it here. You can see the one on the left has the big side of the 2x4, and the one on the right has the smaller side. So you just took it apart and fixed it. I need a little bit more wood, and so I started breaking down some of the remaining sandwiched together pieces, so I can get another frame, another piece for the bottom frame, which I'm starting here. It's basically did the same thing, made another one, and then put it up. The table's sitting there upside down. I put it up at the higher up there. Same thing, screw them into the legs. Here's where I'm fixing the orientation again. Now I'm starting with the top. For some reason I didn't catch the video on putting the top on, but essentially I just cut all the end pieces off that have the screw holes or the old nail holes. They were close to 30 inches, maybe 29 inches. And then I screwed them all down, just evenly spaced. I think I just eyeballed it, starting with the outside. Here is kind of my own personal stock that I had, where I just added a little bit more reinforcement in the middle, because I started taking the 1x4, the 1x4s that I had. I think there's two 10-footers, cut those up so that they start spanning the bottom. So I have kind of a bottom shelf there. So tops 2x4s, bottoms 1x4s. Here I'm cutting those 1x4s. Now I just took a 2x4 and that's what I was going to screw to. They attach to the very end of that bottom framing, and then drew a line and then just drilled 2 holes for the screws, and then used one for a template. Then I just started placing them down at the bottom. After doing the math, it turns out it was like 2 inches spacing, so I got a close to 2-inch piece of wood and just used it as a spacer, and I drove in 1 screw on each side. Then I came back and added the other missing screws. That's essentially it. I'm pretty happy with it. It seems pretty sturdy. I did end up buying casters for it. I'm not happy how I put the casters on. I just kind of screwed them to the bottom with lags. I may take those off and make dedicated brackets for them. So it's just kind of a better design. Then this piece here, I build these. They're 45-degree braces, and I usually sell them. But I had like a defect one, just didn't look that good, so I added on here support. And that's it.